Ella Carter liked work that kept her ears busier than her mouth. At 29, she was the youngest archivist ever hired by the Virginia Center for Appalachian Studies, a warren of windowless rooms in the basement of a former textile mill on the outskirts of Blacksburg. Her charge was equal parts romantic and tedious. Transcribe, catalogue, and digitize the 5,000-odd field recordings left behind by Harmon Bishop, a roving folklorist who had lugged a Presto disc cutter in a briefcase full of blank aluminium discs up and down the Blue Ridge from 1929 until his death in 1951. The discs, most of them unplayable without restoration, had slumbered for decades inside a climate-controlled vault. Grant money finally arrived. The boxes were wheeled onto Ella's steel work table. The headphone hours began. She developed a ritual. Each morning she picked a disc at random, cleaned it with a sable brush, recorded its metadata, and lowered the stylus onto grooves that had been silent since Truman was president. Sometimes she captured the cracked baritone of a coal miner yodeling through the dust in his lungs. Other times it was a church picnic, all laughter and flies and distant mandolin. On good days she stumbled across a near-perfect Take Mountain harmonies, so precise they seemed carved, not sung, and for a moment she forgot the fluorescent lights, the administrative emails, the coffee turning oily in its mug. Those days made the job feel less like clerical salvage and more like time travel. A Tuesday in late October started ordinarily enough. Outside, Hurricane Fiona's remnants lashed rain across the New River Valley. Inside, Ella worked through a stack of battered discs wrapped in grocery store butcher paper. The penciled notes on the twine-tied packet read simply, Saddle Ridge, April 1937, McCrae, household. McCrae rang a faint bell. Bishop's diaries mentioned him only once, describing a reclusive banjo maker who prefers daffodils to people. Ella slit the twine and lifted a disc so scarred she doubted it had 30 seconds of usable sound. Still, protocol was protocol. She scrubbed it with distilled water, set the turntable to 78 RPM, hit record on the computer interface, and let the needle touch down. At first, she heard what she expected: pops, hiss, and the irregular thud of groove damage. Underneath, however, pulsed something stranger, a melody, but backward, as though somebody were pulling a bow across cello strings in reverse. No voices surfaced, just this smeared sonic Rorschach that made her scalp prickle. She adjusted the EQ, applied a declick filter, and replayed the file. Same eerie sucking tune. She tried flipping the digital waveform horizontally, a simple operation that makes a backward recording run forward. The effect usually reduced novelty yodels and children's counting games to unintelligible gurgles, but when she pressed play this time, the headphones filled with a clutch of clear, urgent syllables. North 37.420, west 80.528. Ella froze. The voice was masculine, Appalachian, mid-20th century for sure, but speaking in modern coordinate notation. D-decimal degrees not adopted by the U.S. Geological Survey until the 1980s. After a nervous swallow, she let the track continue. Elevation 3,315 feet. Shelter in the dark where the water jumps. The musical accompaniment was gone. The speaker delivered the data unadorned. Then the recording ended in a scrape, as if the performer had lifted Bishop's microphone and scuttled away. Ella removed the headphones, heart beat loud enough to mask the storm. Decimal coordinates from 1937? Impossible. Something had to be wrong with her process. Maybe a previous archivist accidentally overwrote the source file with an environment science podcast or a GPS tutorial. She opened the raw audio again. The reversed melody showed no splice points, no frequency jumps that would betray digital manipulation. The sonic fingerprint surface noise, magnetic hiss absent, low-frequency hum matching the Presto Lathoir's authentically 1930s. She copied the coordinate pair into her browser's map engine. The pin dropped inside Jefferson National Forest, 25 miles east of Blacksburg. on a finger of ridge Ella had hiked in college. Hurricane Fiona's rain bands were pummeling that slope right now. Curiosity curved into dread when she zoomed in further and saw a note posted by the U.S. Forest Service 3 days earlier. Trail closure, search in progress for missing hikers. Rain Foley, 22, and Micah Ruiz, 23, had left their Roanoke apartment for a weekend backpacking trip. They never checked in with their parents. Sunday evening, as planned, the weather turned foul. Cell coverage flickered, and Monday morning volunteer SAR teams had begun combing the switchbacks. Ella's pulse thudded. Someone had embedded the hiker's coordinates on a disc labeled 1937, but she was listening in 2022, hours after authorities widened the search grid. She decided it was either the most bizarre prank she'd encountered or the world's weirdest cry for help. Either way, she needed a second opinion. Her friend Jude Whitaker, a ranger with the Appalachian Trail Park Office, and an amateur fiddler she'd met at a heritage jam, answered on the second ring. "Ella, you surviving the monsoon?" "I think I found something in the archive you'd better hear." "Can it wait? We've got 2 kids missing out near Saddle Ridge." "Well, that's exactly why I'm calling." She summarized the discovery while emailing the WAV file. Jude was silent so long she worried the call had dropped. Finally, "This coordinate you gave our dog teams haven't searched that spur yet. Access is rough. Landslide closed the fire road, but if that's Micah and Rain's location—" He exhaled. "All right, send me everything. I'll rope in the incident commander." Ella wanted to protest that what she had wasn't everything, just a backwards ballad older than her grandparents. But Jude had hung up. She stared at Bishop's diary, its brittle pages still open to April 1937. The entry for Saddle Ridge was short. "Visited E. McCrae this evening. He played a tune he claimed no living man ought to hear, but in reverse. I obliged. The melody struck me queer. Recorded 1 take, locked the disc in paper. McCrae insisted I never play it forward, else the mountains would exact a toll." Bishop's spidery signature ended the page. Locked in paper. Never play it forward. Ella rubbed her forearm where gooseflesh rose. She ran the audio again, this time without reversing. The backward tune now seemed less random, more like a lament being inhaled by the hills. Had Bishop encountered some local tradition of hiding words inside reversed melodies? Cryptographers call it steganography, concealing messages in plain sight. Folk singers had smuggled politics past authorities for centuries. Why not future warnings past time itself? Ridiculous. Temporal paradox belonged in late-night podcasts, not in a grant-funded archive. A more plausible explanation was that someone recently accessed the vault, pressed a modern message onto the disk's blank inner band, then glued new surface scratches to simulate age. Ella scanned the collection logs. Only 3 people besides herself had clearance. All kept meticulous check-in records. None had signed out Box SR 1937. A break-in? Maybe, but the vault's motion-activated cameras would have flagged it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the building's emergency lighting flickering. The storm had clipped the power. Her workstation beeped as the UPS battery kicked in. She saved the session and headed upstairs. The parking lot was a sloshing mirror. Wind bullied her umbrella. Inside her Honda, the damp air smelled of oak leaves and ozone. She hesitated before starting the engine, because a new idea was forming, an unnerving but irresistible one. If a hoaxer planted the coordinates on Bishop's disk, why go to the trouble of reversing them under a tune? Why risk nobody ever discovering it in time? The archive's digitization schedule, subject to funding whims, could have delayed playback another decade. It made no sense. But if the message wasn't a hoax, if, somehow, that warning originated in 1937, then the path of cause and effect wasn't linear. Maybe history occasionally looped on itself like a banjo string. Ella shook the thought away and drove. By the time she reached the incident command post at the forest's edge, it was near dusk. Rain blurred the sodium lamps, giving the tent city a submarine glow. Jude met her with a thermos of coffee, his ranger hat darkened to a floppy felt pancake. "Good timing," he said. "We're dispatching a team to the coordinate. They'll bivouac overnight, hit the spur at first light." "Any luck elsewhere?" "A lot of boot prints, none fresh. Weathers are raising evidence faster than we can find it." He escorted her to a folding table under a tarp. Topo maps were weighted with river stones. Radios crackled and laptops ran drone telemetry despite the downpour. The incident commander, Captain Sanchez of the Virginia Department of Emergency Management, examined Ella like a curiosity. "So you're the archivist?" "Guilty. Hell of a lead you handed us. We'll know by morning if it pans out." She asked if she could monitor the team's comms. Sanchez hesitated, then nodded. "Stay out of the way, keep the headset on." Night pressed close. A velvet sack full of rain. Ella sat beside Jude, both braced against the wind while field radios chattered with static and position reports. She tried to picture Micah and Rain somewhere on that ridge, clothes soaked, clotheslines of mist draped through the pines. What had driven them beyond Marker 7? A wrong turn? A dare? At 2:17, a transmission snapped her upright. "Base, this is Alpha 2. We've located an abandoned campfresh but flooded, no sign of occupants." "Coordinates?" asked Sanchez. 100 meters south of the ones you sent." Eileen leaned in. The searchers described 2 sleeping bags, food wrappers, a waterproof map case. A half-sung phrase, maybe shock or whimsy, drifted through the mic. "Shelter in the dark where the water jumps." She squeezed Jude's arm, the ranger mouthed. "The waterfall!" A cascade, unnamed, rarely visited, tumbled into a slot canyon below the ridgeline. Its trail was unofficial, a trace marked only by purple blazes locals painted decades ago. Ella remembered reading about it in Bishop's diary. Water leaps the gorge like fiddle strings snapped. Alpha 2 set a heading. Radios went quiet except for rainfall pattering near the microphones. Minutes stretched. Ella's imagination filled with worst-case vignettes, broken legs, hypothermia, a rock slide. Then, at 3:04 a.m., came a shout, muffled by wind but unmistakably jubilant. "We've got them! Both alive! Cold, weak, dehydrated, but responsive." Relief surged through the command post like electricity. Sanchez stabbed a finger at the air, grinning. Jude exhaled a shaky breath he must have been holding for hours. Ella slumped, suddenly weightless. Alpha 2's medic reported that Micah had fallen into the slot canyon trying to refill water bottles. Rain climbed down after him. Neither could get out. Their headlamps failed, and the storm's approach turned the canyon into a sluice of mud and mist. They huddled in a recess behind the waterfall, the only dry patch available, rationing trail mix and hope. A Black Hawk helicopter extracted them at dawn, weaving between cloud tatters like something from a war film. As the twin rotors dwindled, Ella wrapped her arms around herself. She couldn't shake the image of that backward song whispering across 85 years so 2 strangers might survive a weekend hike. Coincidence? Possibly. But something deeper in her bones insisted the mountains had conspired. Micah and Rain were transported to Carillion Clinic in Roanoke. Media outlets, starved for hurricane news not centered on Florida, dispatched vans by noon. Sanchez allowed a brief press statement crediting unconventional archival research for the breakthrough. Cameras swung toward Ella, who muttered that she had simply followed the music. Back at the center, she confronted the disc again. She digitized it forensically. High-resolution scans of groove geometry, spectral images of oxide residue, infrared photography. No evidence of tampering surfaced. The aluminium substrate carried a manufacturer's watermark, discontinued in 1940. Its patina was consistent with storage in a cedar box for decades. Everything pointed backward. She combed Bishop's remaining diaries. The entry dated June 1941 chilled her. Received letter from E. McCrae. He wrote that the tune we unspooled in 1937 served its purpose last month. 2 young wanderers were saved near Saddle Ridge, precisely where his lyric warned. I cannot reconcile the chronology. McCrae insists time bends for ballads. I fear intercourse with madness. So Bishop knew. 4 years after the recording, he learned it foreshadowed an event yet to occur, an event that, in our timeline, had simply delayed itself until 2022. Or did the cylinder's prophecy regenerate each time someone listened? Ella's head spun. She researched McCrae through census rolls and oral histories. Emmerich McCrae, born 1898, died 1965. Occupied the Saddle Ridge homestead until his passing. Neighbors recalled him as peculiar with sound, testing echoes in mines and creeks. Legends told of him recording storms, playing them backward to predict floods. Superstition, maybe, but Ella felt a kinship she couldn't rationalize. On a hunch, she searched the digital archive for other reverse tracks. 57 surfaced, scattered across Bishop's tenure. Most sounded like innocent fiddle reels, but waveform inversion on the first sample revealed coordinates again, this time identifying a mine entrance collapsed in 1972, a disaster that killed 6. Another mentioned a church steeple that would burn. Each coordinate corresponded to a calamity etched in Appalachian memory. Ella realized what she held wasn't merely a music collection. It was a coded ledger of warnings. Bishop, perhaps complicit or perhaps merely witness, had preserved them without decoding to avoid whatever toll McCrae feared. Ella felt the weight of it pressing through decades, the hush of every disc like a lungful of untold futures. She considered her options. She could alert historians, seismologists, Homeland Security. Yet the archive's power lay in secrecy. Wide exposure might drown it in skepticism or, worse, grift. Besides, who would believe decimal attitude shouted from a gouged cylinder, cut before satellites existed? That weekend she drove alone to Saddle Ridge, the storm's wreckage still strewn across logging roads. She parked where the trail closure signs hung limp and followed purple blazes to the waterfall. Water sheeted over the lip in subdued silver. Downstream search and rescue tape fluttered. She sat on a moss lounge and cranked her field recorder. For an hour she captured the cascade's voice, the oral fingerprint of place. Then, recalling McCrae's method, she played it backward through headphones. Static, gurgle, hiss, and underneath a phrase, faint but unmistakable, "Keep listening." She shut her eyes, let rain damp her hair, and listened. A month later, the Santa approved her proposal to found the McCrae Bishop Acoustic Anomaly Project. Officially, its mission was to study sonic folklore. Unofficially, Ella would pass every reversed hymn, every sideways yodel, searching for coordinates that didn't yet make sense. She assembled a team, sound engineers, ethnomusicologists, even Jude on loan as wilderness liaison. Skeptics called it grant-chasing mysticism. Ella didn't care. The next storm season would bring new travelers to these ridges, some unwise, some unlucky. If an 85-year-old ghost wanted to whisper directions home, she intended to be wearing headphones when he did. Late one evening, after volunteers left, Ella retrieved another disc, Mountain Sermon, Cowan Hollow 1934. She braced for dusty preaching, but what greeted her was reversed harmonica. She flipped the waveform, pressed play. "This path forks, where 3 stones bleed," the voice warned. "South 36.8. She paused the track, heart hammering, and dialed Jude. "Are you sitting down?" she asked. "Please tell me it's not another hurricane weekend." "Worse. It's next Wednesday." And though the fluorescent lights hummed and the server fans whirred, Ella could almost hear the mountains breathing through the vault walls, humming a tune that was not a tune, carrying tomorrow on its back.